From the former convent of the Good Shepherd overlooking Inwood Park in New York City, welcome to Inwood Artworks On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home what we affectionately call Upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims. And today, we welcome visual artist Bruce Katz. Bruce is an architectural, portrait, and fine art photographer based in New York City, working regularly for a diverse clientele over a 40-year career. His work has appeared in Architectural Digest, New York Magazine, Landscape Architecture, The Washington Post, as well as for top hospitality, design, and advertising firms throughout the country. Recent NYC gallery exhibitions include SPF 16 at the Arsenal Gallery on Fifth Avenue, Photoville in Brooklyn in 2016 and 2017, the Alice Austin House Museum, and the International Center for Photography. His Elevated Lines exhibition was here in New York in Inwood in 2018 at the Inwood Artworks Pop-Up Art Gallery. In addition, selected works from his City Limits project was recently acquired by the New York Historical Society for the museum's permanent collection. Bruce is a strong advocate for business education for photographers and has taught at the International Center for Photography. He's an active member of ASMP and has served on the national and New York chapter boards of directors. We are going to talk about his work and a lot more than just taking pretty pictures. So I'm excited to welcome Bruce Katz to Inwood Artworks On Air. How are you doing?
Thank you.
You bet, man. So how's it been? What's going on?
It's been good. Well, like everything else, it's 2 years of shrugging your shoulders and trying to figure out which way is up. So,
exactly. It's like Rip
This
Van
is
Winkle.
nothing new for us.
Yeah, true. Well, we just heard all about all the wonderful things you've done and accomplished, so you would think there's really no need to talk any further. But
Okay, I'm good with that, thanks.
You're out of here. But
Suits me just
But
fine.
since I have you,
Yes.
I like to start off talking about the present. So you recently completed an architectural photography book called Sky High, The Super Talls of NYC. Can you tell us about the project?
Yeah, this was actually a really fun project to do for Princeton Architectural Press. A couple of years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, I had a student in my class who was architectural historian and writer. Not my best student as a photographer, but a really funny, nice guy. And out of the blue, I got a call a couple of years ago from him asking if I wanted to work on the book project with him. He's written a couple of books for Princeton Architectural Press and wanted to know if I was interested in doing the photography. So that was easy yes, and 2 years later, we've pretty much finished the project just in time, for this last wave of COVID. So, and that's been super fun. It's the project really is looking at the new New York skyline. There's 12 buildings that we're concentrating on. Many of them are not finished yet, but they're all, it's Billionaires Row on West 57th Street, a few select buildings at Hudson Yards, some, notable buildings downtown, and one in Brooklyn.
Well, you have a portfolio of many architectural projects, and it seems to me one of the hurdles that you have to continually overcome and you have to compete not only with pandemics, but with weather, with other buildings, and access to them, and landmarking maybe as well, and what you can and cannot shoot perhaps, as far as NYC that might prohibit you from the angle of the shot desired. There's a place. Say landmarking, I mean something in the way of your shot, so to speak. So can you share what considerations are made in deciding your approach to shooting this book and the buildings in this project, and perhaps share a story about the lengths you've gone to and methods you've used to get yourself in position to achieve, hopefully, a shot that you're trying to capture?
Well, interestingly enough, I can't say that it went completely smoothly, but one of the side benefits of having worked in the city for 25 years now, something like that, maybe a little longer, closer to 30 years, is that my existing clients, several of the buildings that we were shooting were handled by some existing clients of mine. And the others that weren't, I've had dealings with, the property owners, the developers and stuff. And I feel like my longevity here, or at least working in the city, has given me access to places with just a phone call and somebody saying, hey, sure, happy to let you up on the roof of my building. But from a photographic perspective, the super talls are almost impossible to shoot from the street. There's very few places in the city that you can see the entire building, particularly the stuff that's in Midtown and on West 57th Street, from the ground to the top. There's no really open vistas that you can shoot detailed shots of these buildings from. So part of what I was doing was trying to put the new buildings in context of the city, shooting them from Central Park and how it's changed how we see Central Park. If you're in the Sheep Meadow, looking south along 57th Street, if just, 3 or 4 years ago, none of these buildings existed, or only a couple of them existed. Mm-hmm. It's really in the last 10 years that entire skyline has changed. So really, I'm just trying to put the buildings in context with the rest of the city and getting some nice photographs that show the architecture and the design of the buildings themselves, which vary wildly, in my opinion. Some of them, there are a couple that I think are beautifully designed. Others, I think are awful. It's going to be up to the writer to decide how he frames that, but I certainly have my thoughts. And we could spend hours talking about that.
We'll create a podcast series of buildings Bruce hates.
Yes.
And likes.
It's a long...
Parenthesis. Yeah. Parenthesis and likes.
No, but it's been a photographic challenge, but mostly because they're tall and skinny and looks like pencils stuck in the ground, and trying to make something of that photographically is incredibly challenging. I managed to find a couple of vistas and rooftops and places to shoot this stuff from that I think are really unique, and I certainly enjoyed. So we'll see. So far, the initial design and stuff of the book looks really nice, and I'm looking forward to seeing this thing in print.
So when will it be available in print?
Should be scheduled for release in November 22. So next November, we should have something on the shelves.
Gotcha. I'm going to pedal back something you said earlier, is that you have a 25-year career here. You didn't start here. You started in D.C., I believe, and came here. So I think it's an interesting thing to share, because I know you're big on education, too, in communities. It's like, it's not just what gear you got, man, and the know-how, but I think from you can't teach experience. It's something you have to go through and find it your own way. So I think some people listening might wonder, wow, that's Scott Supertall sounds like an amazing gig, and he just made these phone calls and walked in the buildings. But I think, could you touch on like the foundation you've built with these people, and like the other gigs that got you this gig, and able to have access to create these shots? Because I think some people might be thinking, well, how do you even get your foot in the door and working in these kind of clienteles?
That's a really interesting question. And part of that is it has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. Back when I started my career, I think they used coal-fired cameras. that we still use.
Someone right now just Googled coal fire camera,
Yes,
by
I
the
know,
way.
I know.
Okay.
It's back when I started my
Is that
career.
an icon?
You could there were paths certainly for commercial or editorial photography that you could follow where the market was not as saturated as it is now, and people would see, you could literally meet people, bring portfolios around, a physical portfolio, present it to somebody. They'd look at it, they'd consider it. There were opportunities for young photographers where regional magazines, as an example, in DC, there were probably 6 regional magazines. Washingtonian, Baltimore Magazine, all kinds of other local magazines. They all had budgets. They all hired photographers regularly. You could do one assignment a month for each of them and make a living. Flash forward to now, almost all of those magazines are gone. They're not publishing anymore. So that was a way of breaking into the business. I came up through the ranks of assisting other commercial photographers, learning the trade as an apprentice, as it were. And that was a way of also sort of getting paid and earning your education, literally carrying bags and stuff for other people. And then eventually just kind of slowly breaking out on your own, getting a couple of assignments here and there, and then developing a little bit of a career. Here in New York, much bigger market, much more stratified in a certain way, but also people are open. I found when I came to New York, I shoot primarily architecture, but do enough portraiture and other work that art directors and people that are hiring could look at your work and know that you could do a job well that was outside of what you were showing them. That was a great opportunity as well. Much of that has gone away. It's very tough to get to see editors at magazines now. It's almost all done via your website, or very little of it is done in person. So it's critical to have a community of people around you that can help you navigate that. And that I got when I came to New York by joining ASMP, which is the American Society of Media Photographers. And they, that gives you a sense of community and place to ask questions about process. And with the New York chapter, it's a place to meet a lot of these people on a routine basis and get your work in front of them. And it's an invaluable tool for breaking into the business. I assume that the equivalent in the acting world would be something like the Actors Fund or equity on a certain level, where you have some support system underneath to ask questions when certain things happen in the business. And on top of everything else, it's an excellent resource for the business education part of photography.
Well, thanks for covering all that ground. I mean, you not only gave a little history, but you're also saying where are people now? And I know the pandemic also has leveled the playing field in different ways as far as opportunities, working remotely or having not, you don't get office time or don't bring in something and see people just face to face, let alone a portfolio. You don't get to meet people anymore as much anymore to make those relationships, right? To bridge those relationships.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that's missing, these last 2 years is being able to literally get together in a room with people and shoot the breeze and because a lot of, with everything that happens, photography, in the photography world or business, it's pretty much a referral business. So if you're not out there networking and talking and doing, and it's something you can't do remotely. I can't shoot work remotely. As much as I'd like to be able to send a drone out to go do my work while I have lunch, that's not going to happen. So all of that, the business part of it, it's you end up there's a lot of downtime, and there's things that you can do during the downtime that are productive, but I think everybody's patience has been tested enormously these days.
Yeah, to say the least. But
Yeah.
But thanks for covering all that. And just to touch on the ASMP portion you did too, is one thing you're referring to is the portfolio review that they put out there. So once, or I believe the local New York chapter does it at least once a year, if not twice a year in the past. They've had portfolio reviews where they invite people from all different walks of life in the photography industry, people who have galleries, people who have representation or work for corporations, or just have a good eye, or come in and you get to present your work for them, and that's pretty great for people just getting I guess a solicited opinion in a way, but it's really great to have just like you get FaceTime one-on-one people, again, bringing in not just your work, but you in front of people. So I think it's a really invaluable lesson for people to learn about their own work, and also, again, networking opportunity to help move their work forward.
Yes, absolutely. And, this is in the photography art world, or, if you're putting your work out there in a fine art context, no one these days is going to look at a portfolio. It used to be, this is 30, 40 years ago, museums would have open calls, and you could send a portfolio of work to, major museums, and people would look at it. And, if it was interesting, it might be a great way of starting your career. All that is largely gone. Now it's turned into kind of a subset business where you'd go to a photo festival in Houston or out in Oregon or California, where many art directors, gallerists and curators and agents are in the business, and they're there to sit down and look at your work. But it's a pay-to-play thing. It costs thousands of dollars to get out there and meet these people. It's very worthwhile. I mean, they're very sharp, great people to go see. But the thing that we have here in New York, and particularly through ASMP, is that if you're a member of ASMP, many of these people are available at the portfolio review right here, and it's an incredible benefit to be able to share your work with them. It's broken into usually two categories, commercial and fine art, right. Twice a year. And of course, these last 2 years, we haven't been able to do any of that.
Well, just prior to the pandemic, local residents here who ventured out, because you could do that in 2018, might have caught your Elevated Lines exhibition at our pop-up gallery. It featured New York City from a different perspective than Super Talls. It's as seen from above ground subway stations. So it's hard to believe that it was over 4 years ago, right?
Yeah.
It feels like yesterday, and it feels so much longer in other respects.
Yes.
But one of the things I personally loved about the exhibition, that you could see new and neglected parts of our city captured and juxtaposed many times in the same frame.
Yes.
And kind of recalling what you said earlier about, 10 years ago, City Looked Different 4 years ago. City Looked Different from the Super Tall book. And I feel your images captured everyday views familiar to Joe New Yorker like myself, who frequently visits MTA stations to get around, and it gave what I loved about your show. One of the things I loved about it is that it gave people a reason to pause and perhaps revisit a version of what they saw through your lens with familiarity and also a sense of discovery. And so, how does that make you feel to be able to bring perspective to people's lives and the could be mundane and yet making the mundane quite sublime, perhaps?
Well, I'm glad that's what you got at it. First, before, I answer that, I really just have to thank you again for putting on that show. For viewers out there that, Aaron's role in the community up here is wonderful. It's all unlike the art world where the time between an idea and an exhibition is measured in years, if not decades, for some work. Yeah. You managed to put together, or we managed to put together that show in a couple of weeks and get it out in front of people. And it was great. I mean, I really have to thank you for that because it was a fantastic experience.
Oh,
it was
and
great
it looked good too.
It did. I like my own work. Getting back to the question, that is precisely what I try and do. When people ask me what I shoot these days, I don't really. My subject, thinking back on it now that I've had, 25, 30 years here in New York, my subjects have all been New York City in one way or another, either commercially, the buildings, the landscape around the city, the subway. And one of the things I love about the city, they're dwindling, but one of the things I still love about the city is that you're never at a loss for subject. There's always something that's in front of you. And one of the things that I delight in doing or trying to do is show people the city that's right in front of them. And the subway stop is, people are spending a lot of time waiting for a train these days. And, with the elevated lines, they have this vista of whatever your particular neighborhood is, whether it's out in Queens or up here in the Bronx or northern Manhattan. And, you're staring at graffiti and air conditioner ducts and all kinds of stuff that's in your line of sight. And I just, at some point, found it was really interesting. And, everyone that rides the subway has their own particulars about it. If you're getting in a subway stop here up in northern Manhattan, you want to be in the third car, second door, so that you can get out of the subway at the right spot to get home. New Yorkers work that. And it's the same thing with their own stops up at 225 Marble Hill. You see the top of McDonald's and all kinds and a little bit of and I just found that really interesting and decided to visit every stop that I could and see how the flavor of a neighborhood is reflected in the view.
Well, and just so people know too, is that you can still see Bruce's show on his website. He has some of them up there, and so if you feel like you missed out and you're like, geez, this sounds really, really great, I'm so sorry I missed it. Well, you did, but you didn't. So you can kind of go check out his website too. It's brucekatzphoto.com, right?
Correct.
Okay, it's making sure I'm saying the right places. and I know it wasn't done purely for documentary purposes, but kind of recalling the theme here, do you have any interest in revisiting some of these situations and the stations, say 10 years, from when you shot them, or I don't know, making some kind of like a recall, redo, if you will, because it'd be interesting to see from your point of view what has and hasn't changed, and what you have or have not chosen to include.
That's a really interesting question. The short answer is I don't know. Right now, I always work kind of in projects, and I felt like I finished that project. Going back and revisiting specific stations is an interesting idea, but it's a little bit of a different project for me. And interestingly enough, one of our neighbors, who's an architect, was actually redesigning one of the stations that I had photographed, and had told me just a few weeks after the show that the view there is completely different because they tore down all the buildings that I had just shot.
Oh, man.
So, things were literally changing in front of me. The show's up, and if people had visited that particular station, they would not have seen the same view. And that's true anywhere you go in the city. There's nothing that changes faster than New York real estate. Buildings go up in record time, and, some of them feel like they've been part of the city for a long time, and others are like, it's going to take a long time to get used to that thing's there. And that goes back to the Super Tall book. I could be shooting that for the next 10 years and creating new photographs, but that's not what the project is.
Right.
We have to live with the fact that several of these buildings aren't finished. And, so I expect that with all the stops that, everything is going to be different week to week, even with like the tags and the graffiti that's up there. That changes all the time. So I don't have any plans of going back and revisiting that at the moment. Maybe somewhere down the road. But I'm not sure what I'm going to jump into next. I have some ideas, but I don't think I don't think I want to be on the subway that much anymore.
I don't
Truth
blame
be
you.
told, it's
Not right now. I don't
all
think
the
so.
charm of riding the subway, and even doing shooting the riders and stuff that I've been doing as well, it's wearing thin.
So do you have any pet projects that you really want to do?
I think the next thing that's coming up, I think I'm going to go back and revisit some portraiture and start getting some friends and colleagues and interesting folks that I meet, and just start doing some new portraits, and what direction that's going to take and where it's going to go. One of the ways that I work is a lot of times I'll start something and thinking that it's going to be a project that's moving in this direction. And once I actually start the photography, I realize, oh, this is a little, I make a lot of turns before I settle on a specific direction. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
That's process.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Bruce, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Is there anything else you want to say? Anything else going on in your life?
No, hopefully you can edit this down to something that sounds like I'm not just running on at the mouth.
Oh, come on. You did fine. Well, before we say goodbye, again, brucekatzphoto.com, right? Anywhere else to go?
No, that's pretty much it for the time being. I wish we could plug another upcoming show and stuff like that, but that'll be a little while yet.
Well, you know what? In due course, right?
Yeah.
In due course. It's what happens we're maybe 2 years. If we
Oh,
didn't have
I
a
may.
pandemic at all.
I may. We haven't rescheduled it yet, but I am supposed to speak at B&H at some point. That was one of the things that got shelved during the pandemic. So I'm looking to reschedule that.
Are you doing photo walks still?
Yeah. I think I'm doing one on March 5th, but just little.
You do them periodically, though.
Yeah, a friend of mine has a very fun little business that combines learning how to take better pictures with traveling around the city. It's mostly aimed at, I won't say tourists, but folks that are visiting the city that want to up their photography game, and it's a lot of fun to kind of walk around and help them out with which way to point their camera.
Gotcha. And what is that called? Where do people go for that? Just curious.
That is Photo Safari. I think it's photosafari.com, but I don't know if you're gonna.
Yeah, we can put it up there.
In there. I'll get you that that info, and I'm sure my friend Zim will be very happy for that.
We take money for sponsorship all the time. I'm kidding. Free, gratis.
Zim is I really like, this I do. It's fun. I have a good time with it, and it's a great way for people that love photography to kind of knock around the city and learn a little. And, she has a great little business going, and I'm happy to help out with her.
There you go, folks. You know what to do. Well, thank you, Bruce, for joining me on this Artist Spotlight episode of Inwood Artworks On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes that make their home here in Upper Manhattan. If you have a moment, please show us some love right now by rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. It really does help us. And many thanks to Church of Good Shepherd here at NYC, up here in Inwood, for hosting us, and to hidesites.com for uptown promotional support. Be sure to follow us on social media at Inwood Artworks to keep up all that we do, which includes the Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Al Fresco, pop-up art galleries, live performances, and so much more. You can support On Air and all of our programming by making a tax-free donation at inwoodartworks.nyc/donate. This program is supported in part by public funds from New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with City Council. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Artworks On Air.